On December 7th, 2022, the Nova Scotia government released Our Climate, Our Future, Nova Scotia's climate change plan for clean growth. This plan is meant to provide the roadmap for how Nova Scotia is going to tackle the climate crisis. In this video series, Voices on the Climate Plan, we speak with different community members, leaders, and organizers to get their thoughts on how the plan measures up to this huge task. All 6 videos will be available on our YouTube channel, so be sure to check them all out.
My name is Brian Gifford, and I've been the chair of the Affordable Energy Coalition for 10 years. Nova Scotia has one of the highest rates of energy poverty in the country. There are several reasons for this. A lot of our homes, especially in rural Nova Scotia, are large and poorly insulated. There's generally lower income levels here in Nova Scotia. Because we have relied on fossil fuels in our electricity system, we have some of the highest electricity costs in the country. A lot of our homes are heated with oil, which is very expensive. So that contributes to the high level of energy poverty here in Nova Scotia. It creates all kinds of financial pressure on them, and they have to choose between essentials often, between medication or even just rent and keeping the heat and the lights on. They're juggling bills and sometimes facing disconnection of their power. So it creates a lot of stress. Both their health suffers and their quality of life suffers quite substantially because energy services are an essential service in modern society. We consider it a human rights issue that low-income households have access to energy services and they're not denied those services because of their income.
The climate change risk assessment recognizes that the climate emergency affects and will continue to affect populations in different ways that are very unequal. In your opinion, does the climate plan do enough to protect people who are most vulnerable?
The kind of vulnerability that I'm used to dealing with is low-income households. The plan generally is strong on intentions but weak on specifics. So I would call it half of the real plan. Some of its actions have specific targets and deadlines for completion, which is what's required to really generate good action later on. But most don't. They're just vague statements of aspirations. Action 26 is very good in that it has clear targets and deadlines, but it could be more ambitious. It's very specific. It says how much will be done by when. Action 27, however, is way too vague. It has no targets or timelines. It could have said, reduce energy use by at least 50% for at least an additional 30,000 low-income households by 2030 through programs such as home warming, the Affordable Multifamily Housing Program, and the Mi'kmaq Home Energy Efficiency Program. That would be ambitious and game-changing. And that's the kind of thing we were hoping would be in the plan. In some places it's there, but in other places, including the low-income part that we're most concerned about, is just not there. Actions 29 and 30 have clear targets and deadlines, but they aren't ambitious enough. Action 29 is very good as far as it goes. Everybody will know whether it's happened or not. But I would have liked to see an earlier deadline and to see it include a ban on replacement of oil-fired heating equipment in existing buildings. So it could have been stronger and should have been stronger. Action 30 says adopt the 2020 National Energy Code for buildings and the 2020 National Building Code. The 2020 National Energy Code is an important innovation. It includes 4 tiers of standards called a step code. The problem with Action 30 is it does not say what tier will be in use in Nova Scotia. It could and should have said Nova Scotia municipalities will be able to adopt any of the top 3 tiers. It could have required all new homes be net zero by 2030, the way some other provinces have. That would be ambitious and appropriate. The other area that the Affordable Energy Coalition would have liked to see action on is creating a systematic program to reduce energy bills for low-income households until efficiency does the job. That's part of a just transition. There is no mention of this in the climate plan. This government, like the ones before it, have in practice supported very good low-income efficiency programs. So we are rated as the second best in Canada. We would have liked to see clear, ambitious goals in the climate plan to expand and deepen their commitment to help low-income households. We're undergoing a huge transition right now in energy in order to save ourselves from climate disasters. At the end of it, people's energy costs will actually be lower, and that's because they'll use less energy because of efficiency upgrades and things like heat pumps. The problem for low-income households is they can't afford to pay for the transition. So that's why there are these special programs needed that are designed for low-income households. They create programs that are free, and where somebody comes in and says, makes recommendations about what's needed, and after the homeowner signs off, then they get it done. That's what the Nova Scotia home warming program is like, and it's a very, very good program. Low-income households, to benefit from the transition, to participate in it and not be left out, need those kinds of programs. Till they get to the other side of the transition and have lower energy costs, they need help with their bills. So we've been advocating for both of those things, the short-term help in a systematic way and the medium to long-term help with efficiency upgrades. Another detail is that African Nova Scotian communities have historically had difficulty with title for reasons of past racism. Like when they were given land, they were often leased land and not given outright title, unlike white settlers, for instance. So there's a historic problem with title in African Nova Scotian communities, and one of the requirements to participate in the home warming program is you have to have title. They need special conditions, a special program for African Nova Scotian communities to make sure that they can actually participate in the low-income efficiency programs. In the climate plan, it says that they will look at creating an African Nova Scotian program, which is good, but again, it's there's no date by which it'll be done, and the commitment is a bit soft.
What do you think is the biggest thing that's missing in the climate plan?
A clear statement of how many low-income homes they expect to have upgrades and at what level of upgrade and by when. There is a statement saying that they will continue to upgrade low-income homes through existing programs like home warming and the affordable multifamily housing program. That's good, but it's vague and it doesn't really drive anything. There's a lot of very good stuff already happening in Nova Scotia, and the plan could have built on that by having really clear, ambitious goals, and it doesn't.
In the past 5 decades that you've been part of the environmental movement, how does this plan kind of hold up?
Specific targets and deadlines drive real results, like the goals in the 2007 Environmental Goals and Sustainable Prosperity Act, put in force by another Conservative government, and drove a lot of very good climate action. The thing that was really exceptional about EGSPA, that it had specific targets and the dates by which that would happen. It was clear enough that you could tell if it was meeting its goals. This plan has some things like that, but a lot of it is too vague. So you can't measure whether they've actually accomplished what they said they wanted to do in the plan. This plan is not a law. There is a law that was passed a year ago. So you have to look at the two of them together.
Do you get the sense that this government understands the climate crisis and takes it seriously?
I think they understand that it's a serious issue. It's a mixed bag. They're the first government that announced that coal plants would be closed by 2030. That moves the deadline 10 years earlier than it was before. Like previous governments, they've been very supportive of the low-income programs. Then they go ahead with, allowing the Cameron coal in the Donkin mine to start mining again, even though they have both safety violations and it just undermines our climate action. Another example like that was when they intervened in the affordable housing crisis by insisting that certain parcels of land be developed into housing, and one of them was on a wetland, which is a very good carbon storing element that was already here, and they didn't think about that when they identified that as for affordable housing. For every policy they do, they don't seem to be taking into account the climate change goals that they have.